So Saturn in the first house in astrology, right? Saturn in the first house. Saturn is a planet of discipline, stability. Um, you know, you know, setting limitations for yourself. That ultimately, that's your structure, is what I'm saying. You don't have to do everything under the sun. You don't have to, fuck around all the time. You can step back and be like, well, is this really gonna help me out in the long run? Is people gonna see me as a person that has their shit together? Are people gonna see me as a person they can come to for information? Are they gonna see me as a person that knows things? Are they gonna see me as a person that just likes to be creative and fuck around and play games and liven the mood and just solely do that? you know so these placements are gonna let you know if you're like good like that or you're not. And good at seeing what's actually there, seeing things in a grand way, and kind of losing yourself in shit like that, and not seeing things for what they are, because Saturn is a sign that, sees shit for what it is, you know, even if it's good, bad, it's there. What are we going to do right now? What practical moves are we going to make? What type of conversations are we going to have to get us to, make things, make sense for us in this reality, right? If you wanted the Brazilian, you go to the Gilmore gas station. So basically, depending on what sign it is, in Saturn, and then what your sun or moon sign is, you're gonna have the like it makings for like person who is like well grounded, put together, um, can take practical actions for themselves to, get themselves out of shitty situations, and then, also have that structure there to like then, put on other people. If you're gonna like be around me, you have to be this kind of way. You have to be this kind of way. I don't associate with these kind of people because these kind of people drag me down. These type of people are not worth associating with. They'll slow me down. They will do this. They'll do that. This is a sign that shows you show maturity. In this sign, if you're in tune with this energy, within yourself. Um, but let's get started with these signs, right? So Saturn in the first house when it's in Aries. So this person sees what they like want. They envision it, they want it, they have the ability to go get it too. But in doing that, they also like to, be recognized and like want you to take note of what they do as they're doing that. So basically what I'm saying here is they like to have a little bit of fun too along their way, a little bit. And they don't mind getting, into like confrontations with others. In doing that, sometimes they lose everything they have because they want to like start fights with other people. You know, it's like they're standing up for what they believe in like an extreme way. You know, sometimes it ain't though. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it ain't that extreme, but it can be when like the person also has fire in their like sun or moon, or water in the sun or moon, and then they get frustrated a lot with their like current situation. So they like don't want to be thinking about the current situation and like what they have to, the steps they have to take to get themselves out of that shitty situation. Necessarily, they're like, okay, let's start some fun, or let's cause some, you know, excitement. That's how they view it. Let's get some, let's make some things happen real quick, and they have the ability to do that, right? And then, like I said, that happens to people who are like, like round types, more creative types, more flamboyant types, fire and water and the moon and sun, right? But if you're of wind and earth, you could find yourself being a person who sees things for what they are, and being good at communicating with people and having normal conversations and stuff, right? But you are gonna also struggle here because it's like you see it, You know what it takes to get there, but you still find yourself getting frustrated and sometimes overwhelmed because you also still need those people to see that you're, it's like in you, like, but it's like a thing that's like, it's not like you like need that, but it would be good if it was there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I need somebody to like acknowledge that I'm like doing the right thing. I'm like grinding, doing this, and I am, coming through. I am, doing this, and I am going to accomplish these things, and then people are going to want to confide in me for, you know, those type of things. You want to come stay at my house once I have a house. They want to, get some advice about money because I know how to, do things with money now. You know, as long as you don't forget that you're, one that can learn and one that can, seek information, one that can, heed calls to, going to work, showing up consistently, doing the best you can do at work, and then, getting promoted over time and other things. Or maybe you're not doing that and you're trying to start a business or whatever. You just gotta keep to yourself, keep doing your thing. Things will, be, it goes through its ups and downs, but as long as you continue doing things and you, stick on the right path, and you don't allow other people to, get to you too much, you'll be all right. As long as you don't let people's words or, lack of, acknowledgement, get you down, and you keep that, fire or that vision alive about what you see, coming forward, for yourself. I want to have this kind of car. I want to have this kind of, life. I want to be seen as this kind of guy, this kind of woman. You know, I want to stand firm on these type of beliefs, and be strong in that, or, let people know that, you can still do that. Just, try not to be upset when other people have things because they are, you know, less agitated by shit and less. And, you can still be agitated by shit without, the key here is because it's Aries and Saturn, getting too confrontational with people when you're trying to, you know, make things happen for yourself. You see your life kind of like not right. And you're like, damn. You start to get upset and you get pissed off and shit. And then you start, problems and shit. But you're not really trying to start problems. You're just trying to like get shit moving. I need to have this and this and this by this time. But like you've kind of been, playing games too much. You've been, fucking around with your friends too much, probably. Maybe you have to cut people off, and you don't want to do that necessarily. Maybe you don't have to do that. Maybe you have to just remember that that's there, but you have to always not get. And the key here is don't get caught up in the future too much. You have to do things in the current time, right now, and do that, and you'll be all right. But if you're too focused on the future and that, you know, you'll be lost in that a little bit, and then people might not hear that. They'll hear it, but they don't see anything right now that lets them know that you're trying to do that, and then they think other things, and then you get upset because you see it all the time, or you feel as there all the time, even when you are not doing what you're necessarily supposed to. But you'll be all right. I think in time, people like you, end up getting the job done and other things, and you end up acquiring, the house, the cars, the, type of, life, and really being the person that you want to be, disciplined in, a certain way, seen as a person that, man, can accomplish their goals mostly. Not necessarily a person that is, well off financially, or has status and knows what they're doing in a career field or anything like that necessarily, but you're still a good person that and brings people's spirits up because you were able to accomplish your goals even with the lack of like a toning shit down a little bit. It's just about getting things done and talking, more clearly than being loud and loud about shit with the Saturn energy. But you can still be successful in life. It's just a harder placement to, be successful. So when people look at you, they're like, they don't always see you in the best, like, as far as shit like that goes. He don't have his shit together that well, but he's still a guy who, brightens the mood and can, make shit, happen. If he, if he's focused on that, or he or she is focused on what they have to do as far as, getting their shit together goes. If they're not, then they're probably fucking around on some other shit, some fun things that they like to do. But the next sign, this person is like that. Sees things exactly for what it is in the present time. They can sit down and be like, okay, I'm here. Yes, it is wrong right now. My finances are like this right now. I don't like that. But I know that I can, feel better if I get this accomplished. And right now I can do that. I have to seek or I have to, be, you know, more calm and more, you know, patient with this type of thing. You know, people don't just get shit given to them. That don't happen. Like the things like, a house, a car, like that's just not just dropped on people like that. That don't happen. Not really, not in reality for the regular person and shit. Shit like this. And you're like, no, it takes, work, and it takes, talking to the right people. It takes, getting to the right position, getting the right job, acquiring enough, cash flow to do what you gotta do. And then you also understand that in life, people see that you have that work ethic in you, that that you are, a good, dependable person that can, work and be patient and, eventually get what they need. Jobs, whatever, they, come and they go, but that you can do things. That you have the ability to work. You have the ability to take care of yourself, love yourself, you know, but like not to the point where you're gonna lose, what you have, because you also like what you have and you like to, create a more comfortable environment for yourself, but you gotta build towards that. It ain't always gonna be comfortable. You gotta be in a uncomfortable state and then work towards that comfortable state. I know how that's like, because like right now I'm doing that. Like I'm sleeping in the streets right now. That's my situation. I know what it's like, but I'm staying positive. I'm being more how I need to be. That is the situation. It is fucked up. It is not what I want for other people. It's not what but it's my life and it's for me. You know, I need to make myself better from this situation myself. I can do it myself. I know how to do things. I know how to talk to people. I know how to, find people, the right opportunity will present itself or whatever. But that's not even the case. It's just Saturn energy, right? So we will eventually be working. I'm already, doing things to keep my body together, because you have to be practical, right? You have to be able to move around. You have to be able to, handle shit physically too, right? Because this is Earth. This is Taurus in Saturn, but not always the most fast moving towards that shit. And like in the eyes of other people, they could mistake somebody like me or somebody who has this placement as a person that don't have their shit together, when in reality they actually do. It's just they're working through it right now. So, and in these situations, they don't have it yet. But when they have, when they have what they said they were going to get, or like told themselves they were going to get and accomplish, and be more stable in their financial situations and all that extra shit, you'll know then. You'll know that. I guess it's like you'll know. without, knowing. They ain't loud about, how they like go about doing stuff. Um, to like find their stability and find their structure and everything else because they know too it's about them and like what am I supposed to do? What do I gotta do better? What do I gotta, accomplish today? And today, these people are like those type of people. Today I have to do this. They take it day by day. It ain't about what I have to do, in the future and all that other stuff. The steps now matter more than that. Doing the shit now, leads to shit like that. They understand that the presence is present the most. So they, see things for what they are and they, do shit like that when they're in their, Saturn energy like that, right? And then like, eventually, people see them and, the people they, love and, care about, they, have them, people have them to confide in. When they are going through something hard or something, what should I do in this situation? And you've been there and, came up from nothing, built yourself up to what you need, or what you want, so then you can then impart the information off to those people so that they can better themselves too. But mostly for the ones that you like love and, care about, not just anyone. But by the way, you know, just, stick to what you gotta do. You already doing that. You know what you have to do in your day to day. People, won't see you, won't, take note of you right away. But once you like start accumulating things and other stuff, that's when they start taking note, and then you get your, goals accomplished, more quickly. Then you get on the roll. But until then, it's kind of like stagnant. But you be patient, and you continue to work, towards your goals. But do what you can, because this person, lies in their feelings too. So when they're thinking about, reality of their situations and trying to find that stability in life, and they don't like that they have to, sacrifice things, but then they, they get in their feelings about some stuff. So that's what slows them down a little bit too. But they don't allow that to, make them not get anything. They accomplish things, you know, it just takes time and effort, and seeing things for what they are. Well, um, kind of this person kind of simple about things, um, and like sensible, towards their time and where they put their time into. Not gonna put their time into people who fuck around too much, putting time into people who, have things that they take a note of and shit, and ask them questions. What do I have to do to, get this type of thing? Who do I have to go to? What kind of job do I have to, or where can I go to get a job that I want? That type of thing. Um, well, these people are eventually seen as people who have their shit together, or always seen as people who have their shit together. Because even if they are going through it, they still have that mindset of, I'm going to be that one day, and they just, it's consistency. So it's constantly there. So they're still seen as that, even if they don't have it, right now, because they have that patience and that virtue about them. Now, the Saturn and Gemini, this person, God damn, I gotta make this shit quick. Um, kind of, I'm not gonna, try to make it too quick though. Saturn and Gemini, this person likes to, conversate and communicate to get, their stability, and they like to set, ideas, that, people might have given them ideas too, because they like to conversate with other people and get information that way. And so they'll, create a structural plan through like what other people have given them and other things, information and learning from other people. They like to learn, and in a more smart kind of way. This is also a person who, like, if they have a job, they know about, all the, like, little key, things that other people didn't like take note of. They're more vocal in the workplace. They're more, you know, one to like let their coworkers know of if they're doing things like wrong or not up to par, and they'll get vocal about that and be like, hey, you should do this, you should do that. um, you know they're also people, like I said, they seek information to get themselves right. Typically in their surrounding areas and shit, they don't like to do too much, you know but they like to talk to the people in their area and enlighten them to what they know they can do. And I have an idea about making this a thing. They might start a podcast. These people might start a podcast. They might start doing this, doing that, in like conversational ways. Through conversation and talking to the right people, they obtain their stability. Through finding good friends and other things, they'll come up with other people. And they're kind of the idea guy, the idea girl, in that, you know, we want to make this happen for us. So we're going to do this to make that happen. We're going to, systematically, make this happen in our community, and provide, this type of information to people to um, make us, feel important, but not for that, but mainly for us to, be more, stable in our environment. And we always like to question things too, right? We like to, not take things at face value. We like to seek information too, and get and put information out there. We really like to push information out there because this is Gemini, right? You know, things we know about because we like to read books. We like to, read rules and regulations, and make sure we know that, and then like enlighten other people to know that, like, hey, that is, not in our rule book, or this is in our rule book, or this, or we just, and you like to be a bookworm towards shit, Now you can also be seen, and people do like you. They do see you as a person that has their shit together, mentally, what I'm saying? You make sure you read things. You make sure you know what's going on, and then people know you for that, and they come to you and they're like, hey, is it all right if I do this type of thing here, you know, or am I gonna get in trouble with the like authorities, or am I gonna you'll know all kind of shit like that, and you'll be like, oh man, I think you should do this instead, instead of going about it this way, you go about it this way, and you give people ideas, and people appreciate you for that. You're kind of lecture a little bit, but if it's for like creating a stable life for yourself, right? You like to like know things. You can't not have things answered. You have questions, you're gonna get it answered. You're gonna talk to people who you think have the answers. You ain't gonna talk to people who you think are dumbasses or fools. You know, some fools could use your fucking information to stay safe. And you'll be that for them. You know, that safeguard for them. You know, but only if they like, and like you're also the person that's like, if they don't want to, like, I'll give you the information, but what you do with it is what you do with it. I'm just telling you, you're one of those kind of guys or girls. I'm gonna tell you this, but like what you do with it is now what you do with it. I don't have to, you know, be there to hold your hand or anything, because I'm still seeking information for myself to make sure I'm cool. Make sure I know that people in my area are, or somebody in my area is, cool enough to talk to, and, give me information about what's going on, and, let me know if I can, do better certain ways. I'm there for the conversations and the informational help, putting it out there and, receiving it as well. But the next person, though, this person, yeah, the Saturn and Cancer, this person got Saturn and Cancer. And they need that emotional support. They need to be that emotional support to other people. So let's say this person has, fire, water, and the sun, moon, sun, right? And they have, cancer there in the root chakra. These people are overcome by things. When they start looking at, their reality and they're like wondering, like, why don't I have my shit together? These people are not the smartest people, so they like will ask that question and be like, why am I not, standing on business, right? Why am I not being, seen in that kind of way? Now and then some of them know why, and they're like, well, what can I do not to be a crutch or not to be a liability for somebody else, right? But like to feel somebody else's existence in that way. Somebody who like looks at reality for what it is, right? So these people get upset, people who have wind and earth signs, right? Sometimes when they're like, they know that they have the ability to, get out of the situation. Some of them don't though, and that's where a person like this can come in handy, right? Because you are a person who needs that, a person there too, but they don't, it ain't that that person needs a person there. You need them more, actually. But sometimes you might think that, they need you. It's really, you need to be there for them because you're complimenting them as they're the ones who are actually doing the work to like keep things afloat. Keep a job, keep a, lifestyle, maintain a lifestyle, and not a lifestyle that you might think is, you know, deep and fun and creative. Is just like, I go to work, I wake up at this time, I keep a certain schedule about things, you know, but then, you as a person who's more deeper understanding know that that person isn't always just, you know, oh, I'm there to work, I'm there to, get the job done, I'm there to, you know, make sure everything's okay for myself financially and, mentally and, physically. you know you take note of like their actual feelings, because like the people who are like more practical are the ones you look at, because you're like, we know those people who like talk and get loud about shit because they let us know shit all the time. But like, what about these other guys? Like, what are they going through? How can I come into and help them out? Because I know they ain't, okay. They'll say they are, but they ain't. And you'll come in and, male or female, and you'll, be a support to them. You'll nurture them, you'll be with them through their hard times or through their good times, depending on the person or how they make you feel. Because remember, you're deep too, or you're actually more deep than they are. What I'm saying here is they see what's going on, and you ain't really necessarily, you know, focused on that. You're focused on the feelings that they're feeling in that moment. The deeper things, the underlying things that are not being brought to the surface. And then you like to, be creative with things like that, manipulate situations and stuff, right? But then you also one that gets manipulated too. You then are then a support character for, people, right? Especially if you're of water signage, or maybe you're a fire signage and you have this placement and you're like, why am I like not feeling, why do I feel like I'm not appreciated enough for like what I do for, people in like my life? I feel like I'm caring about them more and they need to care about me more. That's the shit that holds you back from like making things happen in reality. That's the shit that's holding you back from getting that car, getting that, um, you know, these workouts and these, creating that structure you need in life. Building that character because you're focused on that aspect of things too much, and you're like not seeing shit for what it is. We have to go to work and we have to do that. We have to do that. There's a time and place for, you know, mingling with one another, trying to, flush it out more. The shit that's like not, the work job and the, managing the finances and talking to other people who are, friends or whatever. But you're that one that's the support, you know. But you also have to be willing to understand that you're not the one who like actually knows anything really. You're the one presenting and giving the, and this is, I'm talking about for the guys who are and the females who are fire and water signs who have displacement. You're the one presenting and giving, uh, a better feeling, to these people, making the people who actually do stuff feel more appreciated. The ones who are actually, getting the real ideas out here. Why do we have, these signs up saying this and that? It's because somebody had the idea to be like, we need to let people know in the parking lot, you can't do this here in this parking lot. Why do we have, labels on things? Because somebody took the time out of their day to be like, hey, we need to like let people know that this is a place where you can go to get this and this and that. And then there was a person who fucking, put their hands to work and actually built the parking lot and did all that. You are there to like acknowledge that for that person and appreciate them, because like you wouldn't do that. You would allow yourself to get overcome by like emotions and other shit. You would not go to work and you rather hang out with people and get to know the sob stories and shit like that. In turn, you're not like seen as a person who has their shit together. Really, you're a person of wisdom who, you know, likes to go around and like understand other people's pain. And that's not a person who has their shit together. That's a person who gets lost and shit like that. But if you find the right person to like latch onto and shit, you will then feel more secure because you're like, I'm with a guy or a female who makes me feel appreciated and makes like we make each other better by being together, and that's a good thing. You kind of need that support and connect. If you don't have that, then you won't feel secure in this reality. You'll feel like this life is just hell, and you can't ever get. And even if you're of like water or wind, and you're like a person who does see things for what they are, and you know how to talk to people and other things, there's still a part of you that's like, maybe I need somebody here, like that gets what I'm going through in this reality. Maybe I'm at work and like people don't really see me how I view myself. Maybe I'm, trying to build this business, but for some reason it's just not working right now, and it never, works for some reason, you know. But this person comes into your life and they just make shit better. You need that. Deep down, you kind of need that. And for you to have that, it's like that piece that's missing in your life to where that you can move forward and you can still see things, but you're the person, and like, and I'm talking about the people who have wind or earth in the sun or moon sign that have displacement of Cancer in Saturn, because you're still like emotional about like what you see in your reality. You're like, oh my god, and you like let that get you down and make you feel all kinds of ways, and you're not really, sometimes you're not really taking action. You have a lot of bad days sometimes. But then you have that person that's there, that's always, there to comfort you or nurture you and make you better, then you're good. Then like there's like, you're good and you can go to work, you can do all this, you can, make things happen, and you're the one in the relationship doing that. you know. And then, like I said, for the ones who are water and fire signs, you're that person who has to then be that supportive role. You know, you're the one that has to, make shit, happy and fun during the times that are so, not so fun. Oh wow, it's boring right now. There's no excitement here. You have to be that if you're like a fire signage and have displacement. And then if you have the placement and you're a water signage, and you have displacement, you have to be that supportive role too. And you have to heed calls to, and acknowledge what somebody else has, probably gone through, and because you're a water sign and you do he calls to, you know, people's deeper feelings. You have an intuition about you. Now, the person you're attracted to, don't do that. And as long as you understand that, you can stay with that person, and you then will feel, more secure in your life, with what you got going on, being a supportive, character or whatever. And then, if you're like a person that's more like me and other things, right, um, feel better if you have somebody there who can like care for you every once in a while. Just every once in a while, because you need that still. And but it's like a deep connection. So it's like a girlfriend or lifelong partner, or boyfriend or whatever, and you can like make shit happen, right? Better and quicker because you have that extra person there. But somebody who has Saturn and Leo, this person, right? This person, um, doesn't always have this shit together because they are like too focused on being the like center of attention and shit, right? They're bright too. They bring great atmosphere to, a great, bright atmosphere. They make people feel happy and, other things, and they understand that they're the ones who do that, and they like the mood and makes it, fun and other things for people around them, their friends and their family and all that, right? But they have to be acknowledged for what they do too. They have to be the ones that are acknowledged. Hey, I'm the one bringing the fun. I'm the one bringing the, I'm the one, who should be acknowledged for all that. I'm the fun one. You know. But in doing that, you kind of ain't that stable. What I'm saying here is, it's not about being grandiose all the time. And then the person who has fire signage there, like in the sun and moon, and then also has this person in the first house, you're definitely not seen as a person who has their shit together. You know, you're seen as a person who needs people around to, have fun and acknowledge you as a fun person and acknowledge you as the great person you are. Because there's something that you do that is, is special and other things, right? Because like people wouldn't be around you if you weren't, right? But like you get insecure when when people leave you, and then you're like, I'm trying to like, build this kind of thing for myself, where I have these type of friends around me and these type of extravagant, cars and houses or whatever, and I see it, or I know I can, do that, but I need these people here. You also have to remember that you are one that needs to do some things too. And you don't always need to, be the center of attention. You have to like put yourself in a, you know, you have to now, what you should do really is you're the one now acknowledging um, what other people, do too. You're not the one who's like, oh, look at me. You're now saying, okay, I'm not good at doing this. Like, I'm not good at like studying, book material, or I'm not good at just, sitting back and like being quiet and just doing my job and letting my, money come to me and building myself that way. You acknowledge that in your friends and other things, and then they then want to help you out more towards your goals and what you're trying to accomplish in your life, because they always see you as that person that's like, damn, I always have to acknowledge that you're this, that you're that, that you're this or that. that you bring this to the relationship, or you bring this to our friendship or whatever. But like you never acknowledge what I do. But if you do some like a little bit of self-reflection or whatever, even you know do that a little more, right? And this is for people water and fire sign that you have this placement, and you start being like, hey, I can't do that, but in order to get out of the situation that we're in, because we're like poor and we're down bad right now or whatever, I can tell you, you are the smart guy or you're the smart person. You'll tell us information about what we can and can't do, and then you'll also keep me in line. Because if you're a water fire sign, you tend to like not fucking think about that shit too much because you like to have fun, or you like to delve deep into shit that really don't matter in reality. You know, as far as we're trying to like go from this position to this position, and we're trying to build ourselves up. That shit don't matter. And then you like put people in place, and you like check me and make sure I'm good and everything. You know, and a person who's like wind or fire sign or wind or earth sign, my bad, and has this right placement, they are gonna seem a little bit, egotistical about, oh yeah, I'm the guy who, is the best at this kind of work, or I go to work, I do this, I do that. They ain't always like loud about it, but like you can just like tell they're that kind of asshole or that kind of know-it-all, and they're like, oh, you think you're so great because you go to work and you have your you manage your money right, and you have a woman beside you or a guy beside you that's like very supportive of what you do, and you can't do no wrong, or you can't do, you're just so you got it all made, as far as you got your shit together, right? you know and sometimes that looks like bad, and like you won't have friends because of it. If you're a like person of like wind or earth signage, and you're like that, and you're just like egotistical about that, and like, I'm a guy that goes to work, and I don't fuck around, and all that stuff, and you like are intense and like to the point about that, and loud about shit like that, and you keep fucking like doing that to people. That's why you really don't have friends, because you do shit like that. um and you're like kind of wondering that shit too. I have all this shit, and I feel great for accomplishing these things. Like, why I don't have anybody here to like share with this shit? And I'm talking to the people when like earth signs who have that in the like root chakra, because you're a fucking asshole that like plays games too much. Like, you get too loud and too like obnoxious about, yeah, all this, yeah, you are a person who does all this stuff for people, and people acknowledge you for it, but you still like extra asshole about it, or extra know it all about that shit. And then like for the opposite people, people who have fire or water, and the sun or moon, and then they have the Saturn placement of Leo, right? Um, you people, your problem is, you just can't get out of like needing people to acknowledge you, be there for you, be there for you, be there for you, in like the fun ways and all that, while like everything's like passing by. Like, we don't have shit now because, or you won't have shit now because you want to like do shit like that, or we'll have things, but we won't have the things that we actually ultimately want, or we won't have the kind of you know status we want, unless we like cut some things out of our life, you know stay away from certain people. Yeah, you gotta kind of like do that shit for yourself when you have this place. You have to like put people in places where you have to acknowledge those people. And then if you're a person like that don't really need that necessarily, you know if you like your birth sign is right, you don't have to be so like, oh yeah, I know all of this or know all of that. You can still be confident in that you know you can do things, right? And you know you can handle your shit for yourself and all that. But if you're trying to like have friends and other things, you don't have to do that shit so much because, you know, strength is a thing, but then you also have to like, want to interact with other people and like, have a life, like that, because like you want to be somebody that, ultimately you want to be somebody that, people can confide in, but they don't want to confide in a guy who's always egotistical about this shit, like, and they're like extra like, oh yeah, I'm good like this, but you don't do this because you're not a better worker than me. You're not a better at doing practical things that I do. You'll never be that. And like you say shit like that, but if you don't like get too like cocky about shit and how you do stuff, which you might be really, good at doing stuff, right? And like accomplishing your goals and setting boundaries and all this other stuff. But you gotta like remember that you gotta chill the fuck out and like tell them, let them know with like, because you already have it, it's all like the actions speak for themselves. The like, money you have, the things you have speak for itself. You know, and sometimes it is frustrating, but you gotta try not to be so frustrated because then you could lose everything too, and then you'll really be upset. So keep like good people around you that know that they like you and other things, but will also keep you in line. Because sometimes you'll like to have too much fun, or maybe you have to like, dial it back a bit and be like, okay, yes, I am like that, but maybe I need to, impart my information off to people in a way that's, more suitable to them, so I actually get the information off and they actually listen to what I have to fucking tell them. Because I do want to, impart my knowledge off to somebody and, make their life better. But the way I'm doing it is, too like extra and like too, you know, almost as if like I'm telling them they can't do it or they shouldn't, But the next person, this person has their shit together for sure. Eventually, and things, because guess what? They stick to a certain plan and like it's methodical. They're detail oriented people when they like go about trying to accomplish it. Goals in reality, right? They're trying to get this kind of house, get this specific kind of car, hang around these specific kind of people, in this career and be this specific type of person in this career. Be the most refined and the most the best at that job, the way they do work, at their job and other things, right? They are the person, like, it's like they're defined as that person. Like, what I mean by that is, like, they go to work, and if they ain't at work, they're like, so and so's ain't not at work today. We're not gonna have a good day at work. We're not gonna, produce enough this, or we ain't gonna have enough. Um, we just ain't gonna have a good day at work. They really, um, rely on you for a lot of things to get done because they appreciate you taking note of things, details, seeing things that can be improved upon and other things, and then taking it upon yourself to make that shit happen. You know, you also, like I said, you're a person that definitely has their shit together, right? So when people look at you, you know, and it don't mean that you ain't, you know, not trying to impart information off, but the way you are, you're so methodical, so analytical, and so detail oriented about shit that when people see you, they're like, he's like, or he or she is too put together. I don't think I'm worthy of you, and like going to them to ask them questions about like what I should do to like be better as a man or as an individual, as a female, as a human being to like, get my life right, stay more disciplined, stick to, this and that. You're just a person that's like, you know, seen in that type of way. And you're like, people are, it's like, almost overwhelming, and shit, and they're like, damn, I have to do better. and I want to ask this person what I have to do to be better, but I I understand that, you know, it took a lot of thinking on that person's part, a lot of practical dedication on that person's part, you know, because you don't just, you know, do well at your job. You do well when, like, when you wake up at a certain time, you know, eat certain foods, you know, stay away from certain food, you um, stay away from certain people, you know, all kind of shit, you know, when you're actually like on your, you know, in your Saturn energy, right? And like this plays out different ways. Like if you're a reverse sign, you definitely give off that kind of aura. Like I have to like know exactly what I'm gonna ask this person before I go to ask them questions, or I'm gonna sound like an idiot, and they won't be able to help me out, you know, getting my life better and other things. Or, you know, and you have that kind of like aura about you, and then the people are like, damn, you know, it ain't that they like don't want to like, you know, ask you for advice or anything, but you're so put together and so like, you know, other things that like you just make them feel like, you know, I'm too dumb. Like to that point, like I can't even ask you for any advice. You seem to like have never really like went through anything. You've always been a guy that was, or a female that was always, you know, to the point, to the T, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, never making mistakes. And then like a person who's coming to you actually has made mistakes and, you know, falling on their ass and other stuff, and they want to come to you for some advice on how to, you know, get their life right. But they also know that you're a person that's gonna like, you know, run all kind of like details and shit by them. So they're like, you know, kind of like off put by, you know, certain people. But then certain people are like, you know, okay, maybe I can stand to be a little more, you know, he calls to, you know, a little more details, being a little more analytical about some things, you know, taking more notes of, you know, what could actually happen, you know, in this reality, you know, what people will actually do. Like if I do this, then, you know, people will act this way, or, you know, if I don't take these kind of actions at this time, then, you know, things will fall apart. You know, you kind of like place things out, but you do it for yourself first, and then like, you know, you hold your, you know, um, family members, your friends, and your colleagues, all, you know, to like a high standard because you want to like make sure that they have their shit together as well. You know, and you ain't doing it necessarily to be an asshole, but you're definitely seen as an asshole because you have like strict guidelines, strict rules. But people like that. People, um, you know, it seems at times that people don't like you, and they don't have to like you because, like, for you, the individual who has this placement, you know, I'm the one who's secure and other things. I'm the one who's put together and other things, and it took, you know, me, you know, thinking a little bit. Um, Putting, you know, things aside. If you're a fire or water sign, you could still be a person like this, you know, because there's certain things that you need in this life, and you are gonna make sure those things happen, right? You know, you ain't gonna let your emotions or your, you know, flamboyancy, you know, overcome you to the point where, okay, I can step back a little bit sometimes, or I can, you know, not read into shit too deeply and understand that, or really know that realities like this, and I have to do these things to get out of this, and you will, you know, because you have a certain way of finessing things, and like with that placement, you know, and you just know what to do to get out of, you know, shitty situations if you're a water or fire sign and you have this placement. And then if you're a wind or earth sign and you have this placement, you're also, you know, good because you're actually taking the time to think and, you know, do things more if you have the wind and earth signs. If with the water and fire signs you have this placement, it's like you're more creative and methodical and the, you know, creative ways, you know. I'm gonna get you involved in a fun way, but we're gonna do it a little bit elaborate, a little bit not like you might have thought, you know, because like I'm foolish, But when it comes to like me getting like what I need, we ain't gonna be too foolish about that. What I need to be seen as, person who has their shit together. We're gonna like hit the, ground running, and we're gonna, keep each other, enthusiastic and alive during this time. But we understand or know that we have to, do this right now. We have to, because this plan that was laid out. Nothing else matters. And if you're a water sign and you got displacement, you're like, I know I have a creative flow that works for me, and it works for me. So with a little bit of more planning and other things, I can accomplish, my goals and acquire the things I want to make me look like, or make me, seem like, or be, or actually be that person that people can confide in for things, and also, seem like I got my life together, because you can. Um, because y'all are, detailed, oriented and driven towards, something. Even if you're a water fire sign, but if you have that in the Saturn sign, yeah, you'll eventually get your shit right, for sure. Because then you start to look at things for what it is, and you're like, oh wait, I've been fucking around too much, and I know I can, do better than this. You know, it be like that, and then you just start, getting your shit right, and then going back to, have fun. And then if you're not like that, then, people, come to you, and, maybe they'll stay away from you because, like I said, you have your shit together to such a degree that they're like, damn, I don't know, I just gotta do better. And then, they'll approach you, with respect for sure, because they see the kind of work that you do, and they see, you know, what you know, and other things because of how you present yourself, and how you stuck to a certain regimen, certain plan, and other things. And they're like, well, this guy, does not fuck around. This female does not fuck around. They take their, shit seriously. Now this next person, takes their shit seriously too, and this is, Libra and Saturn. So there's people who have Libra and Saturns, right? So these people will look at things and be like, okay, I might have my finances in order. I might, he calls to the rules of our community. But like they like to take it a step further. Remember, this is, Libra and Saturn, and it's now in the first house. So like you're seen as a person who likes to, care for, or really not care for, but consider people in that community. Because like for you, you're secure. You feel more secure when you know that other people are following the guidelines and rules, or whatever, or the laws of, the community and other things. If they're like doing anything that's not like that, that's where, conflicts can come up and other things, and things can start not being peaceful environment anymore. It can start being a not so calm environment, and you don't like that. But you're not afraid now. You're not afraid to like approach that situation, and try to nip it in the bud. Or maybe if you are, you'll do your best to get other people on your side and be like, hey, we understand that these people are in the community, and they're like, running shit down, you know, trying to tear shit down certain ways. We want to like combat that. We want to put these rules in place so that, we can be safe, and we can be, you know, not like that. Or maybe we want to like, take some rules away that might restrict us too much. And you've taken note of it because, people have come to you and were like, hey, I liked it better when, things weren't like this. Maybe we need to like, bring that back and like get rid of these like extra rules, you know. But typically it's the opposite, and you're the one trying to like get your community to make new rules to, make everybody he calls to, so it's all fair, and it's all, you know, whatever for your community. because you're from a certain place. You know everybody in the area. See, you ain't always somebody that's like a part of the like community government or anything like that. So let's say you're just an individual person that like lives in the community and you have this placement, right? You are a person now that just wants their like people around them who live by them to like be doing better because like or have their shit right, because if they don't have their shit right, then I won't have my shit right. Is like the type of shit that you start to think, and you're like, well, I want to make sure you're okay so that my mind is at ease. I know that my neighbors are these type of people. I know that my neighbors are you know members of they go to this type of job, and they like you kind of like make sure you know a little bit of information about people, and you have like relationships with people to a degree, and you know you're known in your community, and that gives you security. I do this in the community. I am this, I'm so and so, I do this. And then you like enlighten other people to that, and then you ask other people what they do, and then you kind of remember them for that, and then you have good relation. You try to keep good relationships with people, and like that's how you keep your security in life. Keeping good relationships with people, talking, communication is key for you. Above like all else, really. And not just any kind of communication, but good type of communication. Oh, hey, so and so, I know you go to work at this place, but how you doing today? And you'll have like lighthearted comments here and there thrown in. So you like have those good connections. Like if things ever do go south, so let's say like a tornado hits or like some fucking fucked up shit. You end up on some fucked up shit. Then they know you and they're like so and so. Oh, that's so fucked up that happened to you. Come stay at my place, or I can give you this for now, so and so. And hopefully things get better for you. That type of thing. You make sure that people know about you, and people know you as a person that is knowledgeable on the area, knowledgeable about the community, knowledgeable about what their job is, and then you also know what your friends do, and what anybody does. If your neighbors and people in your surroundings, you want a calm, peaceful environment for yourself and other people. That's what you ultimately want. you know Sometimes things don't go that way, or um they do go that way, but you're seeing the people who are the opposite of that, who are trying to like, it seems as if they're trying to like be confrontational about everything, and trying to like get loud, and like get to like and like start like problems, like real problems, like starting fights, starting getting just too extra about shit. And you know how to like be cool. You know how to like talk to people and not get too like grandiose. And like, let's say you are a person who's grandiose, you know how to like cut yourself the fuck off. Like it's already in you too. Like you know how to like cut yourself off a bit and be like, you know what? I want to like throw this party and shit, but we can like tone down a little bit. You know how to like not let shit get to the point where it's like too much, because you understand that you're a person that is powerful and heated too. If you have fire signs and you have displacement, if you have earth signs in this placement, you might not be as vocal, but you will still, let people know when they're fucking up. Like, hey man, you're not doing this job right. Hey, you come into my place. Hey man, you fucked up. You have to get the fuck out of here. You didn't respect me correctly. You didn't follow my ground rules. My ground rules here. Um, we can still talk to each other outside of shit, but like you will never be allowed here again. That type of thing. You know, and then If you have water signage and you have it there, you'll find security and shit, and people, you're already a deep person anyway, so, now that like to, he calls people in the community and make sure, they're all right, so you're all right. You'll be all right. You'll find some people to like latch on to, and, and take advantage of, or not take advantage of, but just be there to like hear their sob stories, and then like they know you for oh, this person is there to hear me talk about the shit that I wouldn't talk about with other people. Not really informational stuff about what's really going on, but you can still be there for that, you know but you really want to know about other things, deeper connection with other people, fucking around and stuff like that. But for like the most part, this person who has this placement likes a peaceful, calm, environment. So they'll do what they have to do, to create that type of environment for themselves and then other people, especially if they're a wind signage and they have this placement. Um, in Earth too, but especially with the wind, if you have wind there, and then fire does too. And then they can also catch themselves, and the water sign as well too. Oh, I'm being too emotional. Maybe I'm the one who's, needs to be held accountable, or need to see things, better. Maybe I need to consider other people, what they actually do and not how they make me feel. And then that type of thing. You have that check within yourself, and you're like, okay, or that balance within yourself, really, to catch yourself from slipping. But the next person is somebody that be slipping sometimes. This is Saturn and Scorpio, so this person likes to play games. Um, and they'll play games to so they're intense about things, right? When they see things in the reality that's messed up, they can get pissed. They can be, they have deep emotions about all kinds of shit. I don't like the situation I'm in. I hate. They'll come up with like excuses and other things. They'll be like, I hate these people because of this, or I only want these people around this. But all this, leads to a person who's now not, you know, grounded in reality. They're blaming people, for how they feel, and not being deep enough, and all this other thing. And when that happens, they're then not seen as a person who you can confide in for anything. Like they have their shit together and know anything about, stuff. They only know about what drives them forward, what, desires they have within, now when you're a person of Earth signage and you have this, placement, right? You know, you might be a person who's like good at doing their job and like seeing things for what they are, but like you still have that desire in you, and it's intense, and people can like sense it and other things, or know it's there, and and at some point sometimes you can get a little volatile, a little bit too intense at work, or intense in your lifestyle, you know which is a good thing as long as it's like not unhealthy towards you, unhealthy towards yourself, and then not just that, but unhealthy towards other people. So it's not about fucking around and like messing up other people's lives when your life's fucked up, right? It ain't about so my life's fucked up, so I want to fuck other people's lives up. No, that's not how it's about. It's about, okay, yeah, I am pissed off about my situation, but I have to like just eat it and like find you know people who can like link up with me and like really fuck with me on a deep level, and like understand that I'm going through it right now, but like we will you know obtain what we're trying to obtain. We'll get our wealth, we'll get our cars, we'll get our house, we'll get our finances in order. you know we'll be more disciplined, we'll be more um, we'll become better guys as time goes forward and shit. You don't let your emotions, get the better of you too much. Now you have like, and then if you have wind sign at year two, you might be too intense with like the word plays and shit. Like you might be, so vocal about, oh, you can't do this at work or you can't do this, you know, um, while we're trying to accomplish this, you shouldn't do, but like you're like intense about it and you're like almost to the point where you're trying to like throw hands and shit. You don't do that. You don't let other people's words get you flustered and like you might be right, but you gotta like kind of like, let them know and then like be like kind of like, how the other person is and that's like smart, but like doesn't care as much as you do and be like, okay, well, I let you know what, the guidelines are, or what I know, the information I know about said things, and and what we're trying to accomplish, or what this group is trying to accomplish. You know, now you gotta use what I told you to make things happen, or things will fall apart for us. But you're not gonna like start the problems and shit. You ain't trying to be the one that does that. But sometimes you are the one that starts the problems, and you're the one that gets overwhelmed in your emotional state when you see things in reality that ain't going your way. Like you'll tell people shit and they won't listen or whatever, and then you get pissed off. You kind of gotta like internalize it, or like be powerful with your words the first time. Let it be what it is. If that person doesn't like get the point or whatever, then they weren't supposed to be around you to begin with. Or maybe it's you in that moment. It depends on the situation, but this is Saturn and Scorpio, right? So it might be you who's the one who's not seeing things right. You're trying to be the one that's always right. Or and let's take it to the other people now, the people who are of fire and water sign that you have Saturn and Scorpio. These people, you people, definitely fuck around, definitely, get volatile when things don't go your way. And that's why you're not right. So what you gotta do is you gotta find people who really fuck with the fun shit you got going on. Like who really will like be with you and other things. And then if you're like on the watery side of shit, right? That one person who's like really got you and shit and like will, check you and all kind of stuff, but will still remain there. They ain't, leaving now. They're there for your, fucked up shit. They're there for your good shit. They're there for you always. You know, you don't shy away from those people. You keep that shit around. Because you're actually supposed to help those people out in that you are the more like active, more intense one in the relationships in your, group of colleagues and your group of, whatever. You don't let that shit like get the best of you though, to the point where you like lose everything. Like you lose your cars, you lose your fucking, any type of financial, thing you had because you wanted to make an emotional decision in that moment that was, based off of how people were, treating you, and you felt like they didn't have the guts to, do what you felt like they needed to do, or you know, maybe you were coming off too powerful, too, extra, like just do what you gotta do, and it's cool, and it is what it is. It'll happen and other things. You don't let that shit drag you down and other stuff. But this person tends to let shit drag them down, so then they don't have a great root chakra pull always. But if you find a person who like can fuck around with you and make things interesting, or really keep up with your intensity outside of work, and then like also checks you and be like, hey, you don't need to like keep being so active on your foolish shit so much. You need to like focus that energy towards our goals of like making money, making other people happy, or whatever it be. so we can live a better life, better financial life, better, life in the eyes of other people. If you want to be a person that's confided in later on in life, maybe you do go through those, ups and downs, and it's more downs for you, but you know, you're still a person of wisdom. At the end of the day, you're just not a person that always is seen that have their shit together. You just ain't, because you're doing too much. You're intensifying things. You're, going after what you desire, which is a good thing to do in life and other things, and that's a, quality to have. But when you're like looking at, trying to stay disciplined, or trying to, go after strictly your money, your things, so you have, status, and you look like a guy or female that has their life in order. You know, sometimes you don't look like that to like, and it's about how you look to like the world at large and shit. It too with Saturn. It is. It's about how you look. Do you look like you have, occupation that's, what are you a person who has their shit together? You have your money right. You have your car, your house. Are you making sure you are taking care of for yourself? Are you you probably you're a person that's a sport for somebody else, but like you might not see it that way. So like it's conflict there in your life. So you seem like you feel like it looks like you don't have your shit together. But like the trade-off is you then are a person who has wisdom, and the like downsides of life, and you can then tell other people like you don't want to be like me. You want to like go to work. You want to get your money. You want to you're kind of like that person that like lets them know don't do what I do type shit. you know not do what I do. Sometimes it can be like if it's a earth signage and other things, and you just every once in a while you get upset because you feel like people don't acknowledge what you do, or maybe if you're a fire water signage, you are fucking around and stuff. And then with wind signage, if you're like talking and you feel like you're not heard, you get upset about shit. Don't do that. Because they heard you and other stuff. You just gotta let it be, and know that what you got, because you can't let your emotions get the better of you to where you lose shit. That's the key here, you know. And then Saturn and Sagittarius, these people like to play games too. They like to fuck around and around. Um, so like they seek excitement and shit. When you ain't supposed to seek excitement when you're on Saturn energy. And Saturn energy, you have to sit down, buckle down, and set limitations and not fuck around with everything. You know, we want to, dial back on shit like that. We want to not do shit like that. We don't want to go out and drink alcohol. We don't want to go out and, go to parties. We don't want to go around and fuck around with like everybody we see. We want to, only associate with these types of people who have their shit together and other stuff. But you are a person who actually likes to, fuck around and stuff, right? So if you're a water, if you're a water and fire signage, right, or fire signage, right, and you're doing shit like that, right? You, god damn, I do not want to do this. You do not want to, you know, come out as too flamboyant. Like, cause like that let them know that you're trying to like, fuck around and play games and not work. You don't play games. And then like when you're trying to, become a businessman, or start a business and other things, you have to like kind of like get rid of shit like the fun shit. You have to put the fun shit aside for a while to like make shit happen. And you can like even acknowledge that you have to do that, as you're going through that. You can bitch about things while you're going through things. That's fine, but you actually have to stick to, and sometimes it don't work out that way, and you're like, damn, I know I've been like, grinding for a little bit of time, but I really want to, go back to drinking and doing that other stuff. And then you go back to doing that other stuff, hanging out with, friends and being the life of the party and other things. And then, time goes by, and you see, other people, who you wrote off as like, lames and other shit. They have shit now. They have cars, they have families, they have this, they have that. And then you're like, oh, fuck, and then you start to think about things and, what could I have done in like that time? instead of running around and fucking around and being, loud about my shit. Um, when you start doing that, you then start to, be a person of wisdom and other things. You're like, okay, well, now maybe I have to, try to understand other people. Maybe you want to not stay away from people. You don't stay away from people if you have displacement. You go out and you try to understand people a little more. But it's for you, and because you want to understand how somebody got to their position in life and how they've done things. And then you want to implement that for yourself. And you have the ability to do that, even if you are a fire sign or water sign, and you do that. Because like at a certain point, you'll have the wisdom to like, okay, let's not fuck around. Let's, buckle down and like actually get things done so we can have a house, so we can have a car, and we know information about finance. We know information about what we should and shouldn't do, and like real world situations or whatever. You know, it's not about the fucking around all the time. You know. But you'll probably still be that person that fucks around on some real shit. And then if you're like a fire or earth or wind sign and you have this placement, you can come off as like, I wouldn't say too intense, but like too exciting about, you know, your job, which is a good thing. You can be excited about, working in this area or, being disciplined in this area and other things, but you can come off as a douchebag to other people who, you're trying to, because if you're trying to like look like a person that has their shit together, you know, you ain't trying to be loud about it, but like somehow you still loud about it. You still, like, hey, I got this because I did this. Hey, man, now I'm living the life. I'm so, and you're like doing shit like that. People won't view you like you actually are. Like I'm saying, if you're like a bird sign and wind sign and you have the Saturn placement in Sagittarius, you kind of come after the douchebag when displaying yourself as a person who has status or a person who has this and that. And they won't want to listen to you about that shit. They're just like, oh, that's a person who fucks around and got lucky, you know, and has, this and that because they did, But you actually did, listen to other people and, put in the work, but the way sound when and talk about shit or see things, you see things. And then if you're not in that position yet, or you have your shit together, um, you're gonna be loud and upset. You're gonna like let people know. You're like, damn, I really wish, or I really need to, do this, do that, and sometimes you get involved with the wrong people, and that leads to you not getting what you need. Um, but then you gotta just, man, buckle down, and you can do that. If you're Earth and Wind sign, if you're a fire water sign, you can still make shit happen too. Um, but man, you're gonna have to keep people around, and really, you gotta understand that you're probably just gonna be that guy that's there for keeping them, you know, positive for what they got going on. If you know what I mean, you're not gonna be the one who has their shit together. You're gonna be the one that is there for the person who's trying to get their shit together and like telling them like, hey, every once in a while, hey, maybe you need to like, take a break from that shit. You've already, got all these things, come, fuck with me and, have some fun. But um this person who's like a true, Saturn energy person, right? This is, Capricorn and Saturn. People who have Capricorn and Saturn, they definitely stay disciplined and strict on, what they have to do. I have to, my goal is to make a lot of money this year. My goal is to, get this car. My goal is to do this. They put it all on themselves, and if they don't get it, then it's on them. They're like, okay, it was my fault. It was everything was my fault. I didn't do enough. I didn't, grind hard enough. I didn't do this enough, and that builds character in them. I didn't do this enough. I didn't do this enough. Um, I might have, took note of what other people were doing too much, and that allowed me to, deviate from what I was supposed to do. But I'm really supposed to like really buckle down on what I have to do, so they have that shit, And it does piss me off because I know I can achieve that too, but I don't have it right now. You know, I can't let that get me down. I have to just, buckle down for myself and do the damn thing. You know, go to work. You know, 24/7 or whatever it is. You know, stay the fuck away from those people because they, might be having fun, but I can't be doing that. For a person like you really believe that nothing can be accomplished like in like real ways, like gaining status and gaining real money, unless you like get rid of, people and like people who like fuck around too much. You actually believe in these type of things. You see that like actually does make people go down rabbit holes and other things. So like you just like, nah, I ain't gonna do that. I'm gonna stay disciplined. I'm gonna stay the fuck away from that, and eventually I'll be a better man for it. A better businessman, a better um fatherly figure for other people, and then people can confide in me for things. Like, I need, help with this. Can you help me with this? And they're like, yeah, I can. But, you also understand that you have to have your shit together first. You have to have your house. You have to have your car and other things to be that person. So you're going to do the best you can with what you have, the time you have right now to do that. And you're going to manage your time right to do that. And you're going to, like, go after shit, in a sense way. But it's not loud. It's not loud, really. It's loud once you've accumulated the things you wanted to, the status, the career, the path that you want, the and all the things that come with that, right? Then it's loud because then it's like, damn, that person has his shit together. That person, knows the ins and outs of the job. That person knows, you know, um, what it took to get that and everything else. So people then want to confide in you and be like you and all kind of stuff. And for you, it, not always is about, it's about that, but, and it is about that, but it's not about the like glitz and glamour. It's about, damn, I finally got the things I wanted to, and I'm finally that guy I need to be. I'm a man that, other men can be proud of and other shit, you know, or vice versa, females too, who, do shit like that, right? But they know the like inner parts of Saturn energy. They know that it's not always about getting loud. Now the next person does know about getting loud. That's Aquarius and shit. So they find security in like questioning things in their area, and shit, right? You know, um, we don't always take note of these type of problems in this area. And I want to enlighten you to these things because I like to see it. Now, I like to know what's on people's minds and shit. So you know. Um, I will, create a business plan. I'll create a group of people who, make me feel, secure in myself and, these ideas that we have and we share in common, we believe in, or we have the idea that, people should, do this because we saw that people, have a tendencies for this and that, or, they, people do these things and we're going down a path that's not, you know, that good, or we want to pose that idea to the public or whatever. So we gonna, talk to and, make you, think a little more about what you do in your day to day, but not to like, stir the pot or anything, but to like, actually, let do you understand? And because like you're a book reader too, this comes from like real information now too. You've read books about this and books about that, but you still have questions, concerns about some things. Um, and then you come up with ideas of how to fix things in society. You see something wrong in society, you want to like idea to like fix that, improve upon some things, you know. and you know that you have to like get people around you, and you have to sound like what you know what you're talking about. I've read these books, I've come into contact with these people, and we want to do this, do that. You start getting funds for things, and before you know it, people start all over the place start doing certain things. Um, you know, taking note of that idea that you had or whatever, and other things. And they're like, well, I never, and it's like one of those things for people, oh, damn, I never thought of that before. But, that is a thing. That is a possibility of, things we should maybe like look out for more or whatever, you know. But, you could be any sign should have this placement, and if you're like a person who don't like to read books or don't like to, um, do things for yourself, and like, practical things for yourself, really, and you like to fuck around and fuck around more, you still like want to be that type of person that like knows some things about something. You want to know the ins and outs of this type of thing, this type of thing, and you're gonna like research that to like the best of your ability, that specific thing, and then like people can come to you and confide in you on those type of things, and you can communicate with them on those type of things. If you're a water or fire signs and you have that placement, if you have earth or fire, earth or wind, my bad, and you have this placement of Aquarius and Saturn, and then you can be like, okay, yeah, let me, and talk to you in a more logical manner, more clear manner about things that I've taken note of in our society or in our community, or just ideas I have that can make things better around for the many of us. And then doing that and networking with other people, you come to be secure in other things because you know that you're being heard, and you know that other people see things the same way you do, or similarly. And that gives you a better, it just makes you feel more at home with yourself and life, you know, because and it's because that there's other people out there that also, don't take shit at face value and other things, and they, still question stuff too, and you have those friends around you at all times, and it just makes you, feel like, or lets you know that you're a better person. You're in good hands with the friends you have around, the people you choose to associate with. Now, in the last person too, yeah, goddamn Saturn and Pisces. I was trying to make this shit quick, but I ended up being long again. But Pisces in Saturn, right? This person is going to. I always have this shit together because they get emotional about shit. They're crybabies a little bit, but they're creative in other things, right? So they can come into somebody else's life and fuel what they got going on. So like, let's say somebody's like on the grind and other things, right? And this person with Pisces and Saturn, they need the emotional support themselves. They're looking for somebody to confide in and other things, and keep around them so they can have a better outlook on life too. Really, you know, I want to understand what that person's going through, or help that person through their hard times, because for me, that's where I see my impact. That's where I see my, that gives me security knowing that I've helped this person out, or really been there for this person, because they're probably the one helping them out. Because like you are a person who's more not focused on what's in front of you, but your emotions and shit. Like, so what I'm saying is, like, okay, this situation is like this, but I'm gonna like fuck around and play games to like make my situation seem better than what it actually is, but never really achieving anything like that you actually want to do there, you know but you have the ability to if you find the right people and shit, right? But you're a person of wisdom, right? So you will find you know said people, right? You'll find Um, People who are really to the grindstone, really to their work, that but like they fuck with you too. They don't hate you, don't want you around, because you have also well, and this is if you're an introvert mostly. You have the wisdom to like sit the fuck back and like listen to what they have to say too. You know, as Pisces is an introvert sign, right? But then if it's like, oh, let's say you are an extrovert though, and you have the placement of crap, um, you're still gonna, dial back sometime and be like, what, what can I do, or how can I come into your life and make it better? Because I have compassion. You want to come into somebody's life and make it better, but sometimes when you do that, you can actually fuck somebody's time up because they're trying to grind for themselves. Now, if you come into the right situation, and you meet the right person who actually wants that type of fuck around relationship to some degree, and they want somebody there with them as they're coming up, right? And you're one that like will stick around as long as you can be as creative as you want in the relationship, and they're keeping things held down right for you. You know, things will work out. But if they don't, it's because of some differences. And probably because you are a bit too emotional about what's going on and things. It ain't always like that. Uh, we can't always fuck around. We have to see, we need the money. We have to go after the money. You're not always, fixated on money type person. You're fixated on things that you're trying to accomplish. Those things, and you wanna feel positive going forward in that. Sometimes say person that you're trying to like help out or whatever ain't feeling that way. Let's say you have Earth or Wind sign and you have the Sun though, right? Yeah. You do get more emotional when things don't go your way at work, or you feel like you're not being heard, or like the real things you have to say about what's going on in the community, what's going on there, and then like that puts you down a bit, because you're like, damn, I know the ins and outs of this, but then like for some reason people want to like play games, and like you like kind of like focus on that part of things, and then you end up fucking around yourself and then that like, but like you then become more aware of that as you go forward, and you're like I can make things work that way, or I can't make things work that way. Like basically what I'm saying is you can stand to like go to work and still have fun outside of work, or you might have to cut that shit the fuck out for some time, and then go back to doing that. It depends on said individual. But just know that this person's emotional baggage can really slow them down on like getting shit the ball rolling on things in reality. You want to get your career started, you want to get your status up, you want to get your this and that, but you might cry a lot about the things you're feeling or what you're feeling in other people or whatever, you know, depending on, especially if you're water sign energy, because you care about other people a bit too much. The same with the fire signers, but a little more with water. Um, but yeah, that is Saturn in the first house in the astrology. So basically, just take note of like it like this. If you have Earth in Saturn, you're probably gonna be stable in this life. You'll be able to work through whatever bullshit you got going on and other things, and you'll acquire those things you want to keep you centered and grounded, and make you feel comfortable in this reality. And you'll also be seen as a person who can be confided in for what do I have to do to make this kind of money? What do I have to do to stay afloat? To or live a wealthy lifestyle that I'm trying to live. And then if you're a person of wind sign, you're doing things with people, you're talking to people more. You're giving ideas, receiving ideas to make yourself better. Taking in information, learning things all the time to make yourself um, just do better as a person, you know, and that ultimately makes you a person that people want to confide in, because you see things for what they are and you know real information. Now, then people fire and water signs, you have to learn to you know be more like not extra about shit when you're looking at things for real and you're in your Saturn energy. You gotta like not get bent about things not being fun all the time, and just know that that's how it's gonna be, you know, and that you're actually the person that is there for the fun stuff and like the fucking around and stuff. The more creative aspects of life, using creative flow, which is the higher tropical, that's an orange tropical, that's yellow tropical, that he calls to mostly. If you're a water fire sign, because that's the fuck around types, you know, you'll be all right though. Still, if you keep good people around you who can, keep you in check, and if you keep, the right type of, smart people around you. If you're a loud person who, like, is a little impatient about things, or can, get to, out of sorts at times. But be cool calling the corner, because Saturn sometimes, ain't the best or the funnest energy to like be in tune with, but it is the energy that, you want to like get familiar with as you like mature as an adult, because then you like, I want to make, myself, better. I want to be somebody that people can look at and be like, he has his shit together, she has his shit together. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm not some little boy, I'm not some, little girl. You gotta, know what you want in this life and go get it. You might have to cut people off. You might have to, get loud about some things, but like, not loud, but like, learn some things and know what you're talking about. Be cool, calm corner.